The Miami Heat may have done it again because Steve Settle III looks like an absolute unicorn.
Said it, I'm golden. Told you I'm shining. Had to break through. Plan perfect timing. Giving no hands. Go get it. Radix the ruler. Can't with them peasants. Want to win plus.
So in yesterday's video, we talked about Vlad Golden, the 7-foot beast out of Michigan, who the Heat signed to a 2-way contract pretty much immediately after the second round of the NBA draft ended. However, he wasn't technically the first player that the Heat signed, as mere seconds upon the conclusion of the second round, the Heat signed a guy by the name of Steve Settle III. And in one of the tweets announcing that signing, it noted how he was a 6'11 wing who shot almost 42% from three. So, of course, fans became immediately intrigued after hearing something like that because, one, 6'11 is usually a center, but this guy's a wing, meaning that he could play the 2 or the 3, supposedly. Not to mention that he was a pretty elite three-point shooter, at least according to the statistics. So I certainly get the excitement, but me personally, I tempered my expectations because he was undrafted for a reason, right? Not to say he can't be any good. I mean, for quite a few years now, the Heat's best players seem to be undrafted, but he's not the next Kevin Durant, right? So I didn't immediately look into him right away because the Heat signed several players after the draft. Of course, they always do. You have to get your undrafted free agents to fill up your Summer League roster, and Summer League starts in about 2 weeks. So I figured I'd learn about most of these prospects in a couple of weeks when I actually get to watch them play in the games. But in yesterday's video where we talked about Golden, I had a few people comment and tell me to look into Steve Settle because they believe that he can be the real deal. And because I value everybody watching this video and I genuinely read all the comments, so make sure to leave your thoughts down below and subscribe while you're at it. I do greatly appreciate the support as we're on our way to 8,000 subs. I can't do it without y'all. But because I do read what everybody says, I figured I would do some research on Steve Settle just to see if all the hype is legit. And spoiler alert, I think that the hype is legit. Settle played 3 seasons at Howard University before transferring to Temple, where he was able to play against some better competition now that he was in a bigger conference. Temple certainly isn't the most prominent basketball powerhouse. There's not even any current players that went to University of Temple. Although I did see one of his teammates was Jamal Mashburn Jr., Heat legend Jamal Mashburn, who actually, based off the numbers, looks like he might be a good player too. Averaged 22 points last season on some pretty good efficiency. So shout out to Heat legend Jamal Mashburn. But the best player to probably ever come out of Temple was also another Heat legend, and that was Eddie Jones. So, of course, it's not a big basketball school, and I think that's part of the reason that Settle might have went undrafted. Is because he played his first 3 years at an even smaller school and then was on a couple of mid to not so great Temple teams. And on top of that, he's 24 years old with not quite an NBA ready body. Yes, he's 6'11", but he only weighed somewhere between 175 pounds according to Basketball Reference, to 192 pounds, according to ESPN. So he wasn't at the official NBA Combine, so we don't have his, official measurements to go off of. But even on the upside, if he was 192 pounds, that's still pretty skinny for 6'11". I mean, it's probably what I'm weighing right now, and I'm, let's say, a foot shorter than Steve Settle. So definitely a little bit skinny. Even a guy like Khalil Ware, who we consider skinny, he's only an inch taller, right? He's 7 feet tall, but he weighs 40 pounds more, weighs 230 pounds. So obviously, Steve Settle's not the biggest guy right now, but you do hope he can put on some muscle when he gets under an NBA development staff. Perhaps I do think there's some hope for that, although he's 24. But outside of his questionable competition, his older age for a rookie, and his frame that needs a little bit more muscle, there's really no other glaring weaknesses. If you want to look at his super senior season at Temple, he kind of stuffed the stat sheet. 13 points per game, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, a block, a steal, 48% from the field, 42% from 3 on 4 attempts. Just overall super efficient everywhere. Even the free throw line, 74% on about 5 attempts. So good volume all around. And most importantly, he played 31 games, 33 minutes a night. There didn't seem to be any issue there. And I also noticed that his highest scoring game of all of last season was actually in the biggest game of the year. It was in their conference tournament game versus Tulsa. Yes, Temple lost, but only by 4 points. And Steve Settle had 22 and 6 rebounds on 50% shooting from the field. So it is encouraging to see that in their biggest game of the year, he had his best game. I think that's positive. Now, some of the player comps that I saw for him include Chris Boucher, who I think is a pretty productive player for the Raptors. Nice big man defensive player who could stretch the floor a little bit. That's certainly an archetype that he can use more of. I also saw Jonathan Isaac, who before his injuries was a pretty elite defender, and I think that Steve Settle has the tools for that also. And then maybe on the lower end, I also saw Al-Farouq Aminu, who was still a good role player, played quite a long time in this league. So with Steve Settle, we're not talking about a star, but definitely a role player that could stick around in the league for a very long time. And as an undrafted player, I think that's good value. Now I wanted to get into some of his strengths and weaknesses, which are my own, because of course this guy was not in any mock drafts. I don't have Kevin O'Connor, that dumbass. I don't have his article to read, and that's probably a good thing because that guy's just a Heat hater anyways. But these are my strengths and weaknesses that I came up with based off watching some of his film and the research that I did today. The first strength I have listed is just his length and fluidity with his length, because yeah, you can have a lot of tall players, but this guy looks comfortable out there. He moves like a guard, which I guess is why we saw him listed as a wing in that initial tweet where they announced his signing to the Heat. Because yeah, look at Vlad Golden. He's 7 feet tall. He don't move like Steve Settle does. I think he has a pretty decent handle for his size, and his transition game is just beautiful. A lot of times his defense leads to offense, and when he gets those steals or gets a rebound, he is able to push the pace with the ball in his hands and just looks good while doing it. In a similar way to Nikola Jovic, I think Jovic is better. Jovic played a lot of point guard growing up. We kind of hope he has the ball in his hands a lot next season. I don't know if that will ever be Steve Settle's role, but he is a guy that is still fluid for his size, and there's always some potential when that's the case. The next strength that I have listed is his shooting and overall spacing. I don't think that he'll be a sniper in this league. I don't think he'll be a guy that you want taking 6 or 7 threes a game, but he's certainly not a guy that's going to clog up the paint. He's certainly a guy that defenders are going to have to respect, meaning if he is playing next to Bam Adebayo or Tyler Hero, he's going to help open up the driving lanes for those guys, because if the defender does not come out to guard Steve Settle, he will knock it down. I don't love his mechanics. I don't think those are super fluid. I think there's a little bit of I don't want to say hitch, but it just doesn't look one motion. It looks like a little bit of a 1-2. And also, he does have a bit of an inconsistent base. There's times I see where it looks like his knees are touching when he shoots. Sometimes that's common among these taller, skinnier players just because it's just kind of their natural motion of their knees to go in. And then when he jumps, it's almost like his heels click together, like he's Dorothy in Wizard of the Oz. Some things I don't like about the form there, but numbers never lie. 4 attempts, 42%. That's not a small sample size. Now, for his career in college, he was only 34% from 3, but even that is not that bad at all. So shooting, I do think is a plus, or at least spacing, but let's not think that he's going to be some kind of sniper out there. So definitely temper your expectations there. The next strength I have listed is his face-up scoring. Similar to me saying he has decent handle for his size, he is a guy that can attack a closeout. So if there is a game when he gets hot, defenses come out to guard him. Well, now you got a 6'11 guy that could dribble, get to the rim, and finish with some pretty good athleticism. So I don't think he's one-dimensional offensively. Now, defensively, that's the next strength I have listed, specifically his versatility. He's able to use his length in passing lanes. I think he also can use it to guard 3s through 4s, maybe 3s and 4s. I don't know if his lateral quickness is good enough to guard 2s. That's something I'm really going to want to keep an eye on in Summer League, but certainly 3s and 4s. Obviously, he has the height to guard 5s. but he's just a little bit too skinny. Like he's not going to be able to mess with an Ivica Zubac even or something like that. Those guys I think would abuse him. But the goal is, if he can put on some weight. It's just, I know he's already 24, but you could still put on weight. I mean, 24 is not a finished product. Some guys are just late bloomers, and that's the case with Steve Settle. But even if he can't guard fives, that's fine. I don't think he'd play your center in any lineups. He'd more than likely be the 4, and then he can guard a lot of the smaller, quicker 3s or 4s, which is a positive for the Miami Heat. The last strength I have listed is just his role player skills. I think he's a guy that can thrive without the ball. I think he's a guy that can be a connective passer. The ball's not going to stick. I saw him make a lot of nice reads when he was with Temple. The ball gets swung to him, and then you have a guy cutting back door. Let's say he's running off the bench unit with Pelle Larsson, who I think has been an excellent cutter in his rookie season. I do think that Steve Settle is a guy that can find him. He hustles hard. He crashes the boards offensively. Just does all the things that you want in a role player, and that's a thing that's great for, again, an undrafted guy. I think he'll have a long career in this league as a role player. A couple of weaknesses that I have that he's not a fantastic rebounder. We said he averaged about 6 boards per game as a senior. As a 6'11 guy with some athleticism, I would have liked to see a little bit more. I think some of that may be because of his physicality, which is the next weakness that I have there. In college, it's not as big a glaring issue, but in the NBA, I do wonder how he'd fare against, NBA physicality. If he wasn't a great rebounder in college, it's probably not going to be better in the pros. But if he's playing, maybe he does get some small forward minutes for the Heat. I doubt it, because Spo will play a 6'4 guy at power forward. I doubt he'd play a 6'11 guy at small forward. Although he might. Maybe he just does everything opposite. And if he does, well, then rebounding's not as big a concern, because then you're playing against Khalil Ware, or playing with Khalil Ware, Bam Adebayo, some other guys that could help clean up the glass for you. And again, he's not a bad rebounder. He's not Brook Lopez. Just would kind of like to see him get a little bit more. And then the last weakness that I have listed is just his potential. He's as a 6'11 guy, like we said, with handle and athleticism, in theory you should be able to grow and put on some weight. But 24, it's really old for a rookie. It is. I don't want to act like he's a finished product. 24 is still a kid. And I don't know if I'd say it's a kid, but it's still young in the grand scheme of the NBA. Kinda, really. I don't know. I don't know how much potential is there. And if he can't get his weight up, a lot of the positives that we've seen from him might be irrelevant come to the NBA, just because I can't see him getting bodied a lot. But as far as his fit on the Miami Heat, he would provide them another versatile forward. Could be a potential Hayward Highsmith replacement, maybe a higher ceiling Hayward Highsmith. I mean, Hayward shot 40% from 3 last year. I don't see any reason that Steve Settle can't get close to that. I do think he'll be a positive shooter in this league. Hayward's been in a lot of trade rumors recently. He's an expiring deal. Maybe he's not back next year. And you're able to get a guy like Steve Settle on a much cheaper contract, which is just good value at that point. Could help you shed $5 or $6 million off the salary cap to open up space for somebody else. And then I think he could play next to Bam or Ware because of his versatility on both ends of the ball. At the very least, what he does provide to the Miami Heat unquestionably is size in terms of height, speed, and I just think he's a Heat culture guy because of everything he does on the defensive end, and those are all things that the Heat desperately need more. Now, to clarify, he was signed to an Exhibit 10 contract, which means that he's eligible for Summer League and training camp. There is the potential that he could be eventually elevated to a 2-way contract like Vlad Golden already got last year, but it remains to be seen how well Steve Settle performs in the Summer League. Could be a similar case as we saw with Isaiah Stevens last year. Was initially signed to an Exhibit 10, came into the Summer League, shocked everyone with his incredible playmaking, and then eventually earned that final 2-way spot as the season got underway later in the year. I don't actually think it was initially. I think Drew Smith still had that. But then once Drew Smith got hurt, I think they elevated Keshad Johnson and then gave Isaiah Stevens that final 2-way contract. So we'll see what happens with Steve Settle. I do think he's a guy that has a lot of potential. Clearly the Heat think so too, because they signed him to an Exhibit 10 right away. but I am definitely excited for Summer League. It's gonna be a good one. Make sure y'all subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content that I have. Leave your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm very curious to hear what y'all think, and like the video because that helps the algorithm a lot also. That being said, I'll see you on the next video. So peace out, everyone.
Look, pull up in your city, tryna get that dead face. Do it on my own, I don't need no dead weight. Had to kill him off, yeah, I need a head space. You know this homegrown bitch don't offend me.